Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to Creation Innovation. I know I say this often, but I actually am really excited today to talk to Isabel Maria Gonzalez. Welcome, Isabel.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here with you today.
She is an embryologist. So for those of you who are not familiar what that even means, good for you, because you're not in that world. And if you may be going down that road, this is a very important role and job within the fertility clinics where they oversee the labs and the embryos and sperm and eggs and all the things. They kind of joke sometimes that the embryologists are the first babysitters of your children that are yet to come. Well, it's far more detailed than that, but essentially, yes, they are watching over that. So I'm going to just start, Isabel, if you're okay with this, with giving your bio, so people can get a little bit of understanding about your history and what that looks like. And for some reason, there we go. Okay. She is the IVF Regional West Coast Lab Director for RMA, the Reproductive Medical Associates, which for those of you who may not know, also, they have a lot of clinics on the East Coast, but also some on the West Coast. So if you're out there looking for a fertility clinic, you can look for Reproductive Medicine Associates or RMA. She oversees the Southern and Northern California lab operations, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego. She has a bachelor's degree in biology from Boston College. She furthered her studies with a Ph.D. in molecular cell and developmental biology from the University of Virginia. Her groundbreaking dissertation focused on regulating trophoblast motility and preimplantation mouse embryos, which sounds super fascinating to me. I would love to know more about that. Her postdoctorate research at Ohio State delved into the exocyst complex roles in human placental development and disease. Her breadth of clinical experience includes positions as a senior embryologist, IVF Lab Supervisor, IVF Lab Director before her current leadership role. So this goes on and on. So I wanted to start with that to give people an idea of what this even means and what kind of your history looks like to bring you to where you're at today. For anybody who is not aware of what this whole world of fertility clinics and embryologists even look like and mean, because I know for myself, having gone through it years ago, you don't really hear much about the embryologists until maybe there's a complication or, it really doesn't come up in conversation, but, they're the front lines, essentially. As soon as you have that egg retrieval, guess who it goes to? It goes to those people in the back that are taking a look at what's happening and whatnot. So again, thank you for being here, Isabel. How did you get into this specifically?
First of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for those kind words. Basically, what that all boils down to is I've been in school a really long time, and I went to school for a really long time because I absolutely love this field, this topic. Embryology has been what I wanted to do since I was 15 years old.
How did you know what it was?
So it's actually kind of a rare thing to say, right? As it twists of life, how it goes. I was 15 years old and I was babysitting, because that's what you can do when you're 15, right? For a neighbor, and she was a reproductive endocrinologist.
Oh, cool.
And I just remember listening to her and what she did, and I was fascinated. I didn't know what a PhD was, right? The only thing that I knew about was kind of the obvious choice was to go to medical school, and I was just really excited by her field. And believe it or not, there was career week in high school, And it really actually does change lives, because I remember I went with her to shadow her, and that's
Mm.
where everything changed for me. I got to see the clinical side of things, and it's the first time I actually ever stepped foot in an IVF lab, and that was it for me. I just knew
That's
there's
awesome.
certain things that you know that you're put here to do, and this is it.
Right. That's
So
so
uh,
cool.
that's it. That's
That's
why
great.
we work really hard to keep going and learning as much as possible. There's lots of ways to get into embryology, right? So you can do on the job training, just a bachelor's degree, and train up and learn. Um, but I wanted I wanted to answer science questions, because the more that I learned, the more that I realized that there was basic questions that nobody could give me the answer to. And that really frustrated me, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to know the signaling pathways. I wanted to know what was causing things. And I was asking these questions and no one could tell me. And so I decided I was going to go figure it out by myself. And that's where it all led to going to grad school, and a long time ago. And here we are now. So
That's an awesome story because I think so many people that are in this field now come to it based on something that happens later in life around their fertility journey, right? And for you to have that curiosity at such a young age based on the influence of this woman, that's pretty
yeah,
special.
she's still someone I look up to tremendously, and a mentor, and alongside with thanking my parents and my family and my thesis, she was definitely somebody who changed my world, and I appreciate that opportunity. So God
And
help a lot of
she must have
people.
been one of kind of the I say the forefathers, but she's a woman. So like some of those original OGs that were kind of at the forefront of this. I know my doctor was one of those first guys at the NIH a long time ago. And I was just at a gastro appointment this last week,
Yeah,
and the nurse was asking me what I do. And I was telling her, and she's like, "Oh, my husband is a product from
really.
this doctor."
Oh wow.
And, she's older, has her own children and everything. And I was like, it's such a small world. And it's so
It is.
interesting how now we are finally at that point where the children of those first original IVF babies are now having their own babies. And it's pretty miraculous to know that this whole generation would not exist without, again, 40 years ago, it was just all brand new stuff.
It was, the first IVF baby is as old as I am, right?
Y-
So um, it's pretty young science, right? We still have
Yes.
so much more to explore and to learn.
Yes.
That is a tremendous part of what we need to commit ourselves to as embryologists, right? To keep pushing that field and that science. So all of those little crumbs of knowledge put together, that's what comes together, and that's what helps a patient, right? Is
Right.
collectively as a community to make that happen. Because this didn't just invent itself overnight, right? It was a very
Right.
long process, and what we've done in the last, 40, 30, 20, even 5 years has been remarkable. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited
Continues to
to
change,
see.
which is
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
always say it's really amazing is not even the word, but the fact that we live in a world that this is possible,
I
that
know,
it, like blows my mind
I
every
know,
day still.
I know. Even after, and this is most sincerely what I'm going to tell you, even after all of this time, every time I look into a dish, every time I look at an embryo, I go, "My God, it works. This is amazing." Right? And I
Yes.
know that's a silly
I
thing.
just got goosebumps.
I should walk in every day, and I have goosebumps too because I really mean it
Yes.
so much. At this point, you should walk in and be like, "Yes, of course it's going to work," but it's just like the miracle that it's working in front of you. And let's be honest, we all wait for the pregnancy test, right?
Yes.
Everybody's, you're refreshing your EMR and trying to see and make sure and tracking patients.
Yes.
So know that during your journey, you're putting a huge amount of trust in. There are these like faceless people, right? You meet us on the day of your egg retrieval. You meet us at your transfer. Um, so hopefully at the end of this conversation, I can kind of demystify what goes on in the lab, but know that we're people that are incredibly dedicated to what we do and we believe in it so very much. And it's a
Yes.
special breed of person that goes into this because it's all about details. It's all about extreme focus, and you got to get it right every single time.
Right.
And we respect the process tremendously. You should come visit the lab. It's the coolest part of any clinic. I'm not gonna
I will be there. You just tell me the date and I will be there.
lie.
So how, for anybody again listening, how do you explain what an embryologist is? What is that?
Yeah, so really at its most kind of simplified level, during the process of in vitro fertilization, you're going to be harvesting gametes, right? And so that's just a fancy, big word way of saying we're going to put your eggs and your sperm together for you, right? So this is the process by which we kind of circumvent the natural process of fertilization within the body. We're giving you a boost. We're giving you a helping hand, and who doesn't need one of those sometimes, right? So
Right.
we we are the people who at the egg retrieval, the clinician hands us the follicular fluid, and it starts there, right? So we're searching for the eggs and we're finding them, keeping them safe and sound. Likewise, it's the andrology portion of it also plays a role too, right? So that's the sperm samples, making sure that we clean them up, we make the sperm all nice and happy and activated and ready to do its fertilization potential and part of things as well. So basically, at the most just kind of fundamental level, we are the tools, the conduit by which we are mimicking fertilization for you and giving a helping hand. It really is a lot like a babysitter, right? So we're putting these gametes, this egg and these sperm in close proximity with each other. And you do your best, and then you also have to let nature also do its own thing too.
Right.
Right? So you can have a world-class lab, which is what we have and what we strive for and what we do. Um, but part of this is also there are developmental components and natural limits to what you can force.
Right.
But we are the ones who put the sperm, the eggs together, and we are watching the embryo develop. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to see, okay, which one's fertilized, and what that basically means is which um, eggs and embryos joined together to make the beginning of, in essence, a baby, right? So it starts
Right.
going from one cell where the male and the female gametes join together to in this amazing process where you're mixing all this genetic material to make a whole new person, right? And then from there are rounds of cleavage, which means that the cells are dividing. And we're taking care of them along the way, making sure that they have the most wonderful ambiance, right? So we're making sure that okay, we can't be inside of mom, but we're gonna make sure that you're as comfortable as possible in your incubator and you're in your condo until you go back home,
Right.
right?
Right. So again, I'm kind of speaking over certain areas for people who may not be familiar.
Of course.
Once they are fertilized and become an embryo, there's a term called blastocyst, where these embryos are then watched for certain days to see if they progress the way that they should progress in order to then become the healthy embryo. What is the process for that for an embryology team that's back there watching? Is it every 24 hours they look to see, okay, is it divided to X amount of cells compared to the next day? Is it visually looking different than it had previously? What is that like literally? What is the process for you guys when
So
you're watching this from day one fertilization to day 5 or day 6
yeah,
blast?
so the this is one of my favorite topics. So if I get too wordy, let me know.
Okay.
So in this amazing program that the embryo just knows how to follow, the embryo starts to undergo a series of cell divisions, right? So you can kind of think of it as almost like a bunch of marshmallows, if you will, kind of stuck together, right? And at a certain point in development, all of those cells are completely identical to one another. Um, now, the embryo will undergo this process where it actually will compact on itself. And this compaction actually will signal to the embryo where it gives directionality to the embryo. So there's
Okay.
an in and an out. And as part of that process, you actually start to get development of two different types of cell populations. All right. And so that's when we come to the blastocyst stage. The
Mm-hmm.
blastocyst is going to be comprised of two different cell populations. The one that is the ICM, the inner cell mass, which will give rise to the embryo proper, and then the surrounding cells, which are the trophectoderm cells, and those are the ones that are actually going to be driving implantation. So at that point, that's the first type of differentiated cell. So that usually happens around day 5. We know that. There's some give or take of how quickly different embryos develop. Um, there's all labs do similar things, but there's some nuances, right?
Right.
For sure, the big hallmarks that you're looking for are fertilization checks, right? Because you need to see who has fertilized and who has
Right.
the potential to go forward. And you usually will refresh the culture media, kind of like that's the food that they live in
Mm.
along the way, all full of nice amino acids and
So you change that throughout
yeah,
the. Oh,
you do.
okay, I didn't know that.
Sure do. Yeah, so there's different types of media and different types of approaches, but you just want to make sure, just like a baby, really, you're tending to this embryo in some fashion or another every single day. And some of the details differ from lab to lab. Some labs have time lapses where you can actually watch it with uh,
Right.
throughout the process. And
Right.
there's also labs where you can do it the old-fashioned way, where you're checking it at certain points in development, usually at day 3, and at day 5, when you know it's going to be a blastocyst and competent to be ready to implant or undergo the process of biopsy if that patient chooses to do that.
Right. And so I was just writing down as you were talking before I forget about this grading process because people, really hang on to what the grade is of their embryos. And unfortunately, there's no standard grading per clinic, right? So what one person could say is a B B, the next clinic down the road might say it's something else, and etc. What how how do you determine that? You
Yeah.
know?
So there are standards in their scientific papers that saying describing what the different grades should be. There are different levels of grading. Oftentimes you'll hear A, B, and C. A being the best, C being not as good.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually will give a grade to both the ICM. Remember that's the part that actually will make the baby, and also the trophectoderm, those surrounding support cells that will be um, important in the process of implantation. So it's difficult. So embryo grading is it's very subjective,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that you actually have to be really on top of within your clinic, and
Right.
also as part of a bigger network, right? Because we want to make sure that we're all using the same yardstick,
Right.
right? So that's part of, and we're going to talk about the different checks that we do. Not only do we check equipment, but we also check to make sure that we're all on the same page. And you do that through a variety of different ways. We have proficiency testing that we complete with organizations that actually accredit us to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
we are then comparing us to other embryology labs so
Mm.
that what we grade is also kind of in line and in consensus with other labs that perhaps we're not
Right.
in constant communication with. And also within the lab, we're always discussing. And we also have kind of testing that we do within and amongst ourselves to make sure that we all know that A means this, B means this, and C means this.
And what's from an A to a C, what's the viability, I guess, of
So that's a hard question, right, to answer, right? Because everybody wants to know,
what are my
what are my
chances if I
chances,
implant an A versus a C?
right? Yeah. So that is it's more than just looking at the letters. You also have to look at the day that on which it was either biopsied and frozen or frozen. or
Okay.
about to be transferred, right? So that's an important component of it. And that's a metric that's actually always moving and changing.
Okay.
And one of the most amazing things that we have at our disposal is computers are smarter than us in a lot of ways, right? And we have a huge amount of data at our fingertips. So we choose embryos based on morphology. So morphology is A, B, and C, and that combination. But also we have a handy dandy kind of pocket calculator that we can plug in different embryo parameters and actually get percentages based on your age, based on the day of the
Awesome.
embryo. So you can really, you have something, you have data, you have science behind why I'm picking something.
So
Um,
cool that this
yeah,
all exists now. I mean,
yeah,
it's amazing. I know that I keep saying that word, but it really is like blows my mind.
me too.
So within, and then I hear not so often anymore, but you still do hear of a mosaic. Is that pretty obvious? Like from like a C to a mosaic, like there's no question that that would be a mosaic.
That is a different panelist that you will have to
Okay.
bring in. But I will tell you that we know that mosaic embryos can implant, and then we know that they can make babies. Um, that is a very that one's a pretty loaded question, but we know that we have tools by way of genetics to increase your chances of achieving a pregnancy as quickly as possible, right? Because that's what we're after. We want
Right.
to achieve a healthy pregnancy in the shortest amount of time, healthy for mom and healthy for baby. And we know that genetic testing, and if you have a euploid or suitable for transfer embryo, that is that's going to be your best bet to kind of skip some of the events that might happen if it's not a normal embryo.
Yeah, I have a client who she herself was a mosaic
Yeah.
embryo.
Does she know that she was? That's right, because that's also true. We might
Yeah.
have, I might have been one. You might have. We don't know.
Yeah.
They might
And she
know.
just had her own baby via IVF probably a year and a half ago. So it is possible.
We know that in short, lots of different quality of embryos and a variety of conditions make beautiful babies. We've got tons of pictures of them in our
Yes.
hearts and on our walls. So
Right. So let's chat about real quick fresh embryo transfer versus frozen embryo transfer. And for people who've been around a while know that it used to be fresh was kind of the only way to go and the most encouraged way, really. And
well, it was your only way at one
yeah,
time,
right.
right?
And then it became encouraged
Yeah.
when it wasn't the only way. And now it's kind of, I don't want to say that it's completely flipped, but in a lot of clinics, it has, where they say frozen is better. And, we prefer to do, we are more successful at that. So, having been in this world for a little while, Isabel, what do you see in that? And what are the differences as far as the benefits and kind of the pros and cons, so to speak? And I know it's different for everybody going through it because there's a lot of different factors, but kind of at a high level of
Sure.
doing a frozen versus a fresh embryo transfer.
Yeah, so like we touched upon, there was a point in time when that was your only option, right? The technology quite literally did not afford us the opportunity to bank embryos. We couldn't freeze them. They didn't do very well waking
Mm-hmm.
up. We didn't have the ability to biopsy embryos like we do now. I mean, there was a version of that,
Mm-hmm.
but you had to kind of hedge your bets and hope for the best. The technology just didn't support it.
Right.
So now what has been amazing is not only do we have these genetic platforms that are very, very honed in, and it's amazing what they can glean, right? So
Mm-hmm.
not only can you tell it's a good embryo to transfer, but also if there's like single gene disorders, you can even
Right.
go to that level. So that only works now because we also know that's tried and true, and we know we have the technology to. It's not freezing; it's vitrifying.
Mm-hmm.
embryos and warming these embryos. And that is a technology that is hugely powerful and changed the face of how IVF is practiced.
And that's only been not that long, really. In fact, when I did it myself, initially when I wanted to do it, my doctor was like, no, come back later
Yeah,
because it didn't exist.
yeah,
And then when I went back at 36, he's like, okay, now this exists. We can do it because your chances will be greater at
absolutely.
thawing
Yes.
of the eggs at that
So
point.
what's wonderful about this is that we have all these components kind of aligning to um, basically buy time for the body to come back down to steady state, for lack of a better word, right? So for patients who are undergoing um, an egg retrieval, there's we this is a very artificial system where we're trying to maximize and balance um, getting as many good quality eggs as possible from you. And that comes at a price, right? We're kind of hopping up your system in a way that isn't necessarily normal. And we
Right.
know this is such a delicate process that it's not the most ideal state to put an embryo back into. So what's wonderful about now being able to do frozen embryo cycles is one, you have time,
I
you have
just want to
time.
stop you real quick, Isabel, because I have never once heard that as part of the reason.
Oh, for sure. This is,
And
I mean,
that makes perfect sense. But it's also really bizarre that nobody's ever said that before. Everyone has always said, I think, what you're going to say next, which go
oh,
ahead.
which is the power of genetics, right? So you have the
Right.
time so that your genetic report can come back and you can say, okay, these are the best quality ones, and this is my best chance, and these are the embryos. But all that plays together, right? So it's also genetics, steady state, and we're making sure that we're then able to prime the body to be able to receive. So the process of implantation, it's not just the embryo doing the work, right? So a lot of people think that, but there's also this huge interplay between what's going on in the female and they're signaling back and forth to each other, right? This is
Hmm.
amazing crosstalk between the uterus and the embryo, and it has
Yeah.
to go right. So whatever you can do to make that as normal as possible,
Right.
right, and not as again, this is a very beautiful but artificial process. So
Yes.
as much as you can come back to normal steady state, that helps.
Absolutely. So when you just said that, the talking back and forth between the body and the embryo that's coming back in, or that's coming in, I should say, reminded me of a book that I talk about all the time called The Biology of Belief. Have you read that book by Bruce Lipton?
I have not, but I
Ooh, you
will.
would like it, I think.
Oh, okay.
But essentially, he is an MD that starts out as a researcher who's studying cells and their reaction to nature versus nurture, and how, like you said, we essentially make their space comfortable and nice for them while they're here. And he saw how that changed as their environment changed, right? And it is, this kind of leads into what I do on a daily basis with my patients and clients, is that getting that they're regulating their nervous system, right? So that everything kind of falls in line so that they are able to take that transfer and feel good about it and not be in this heightened state of whatever it may be, and how all of our cells kind of come together and like
Hugely
play
connected.
this role.
Absolutely, right? All of it is, it's not just a singularity in space and time. Everything is working together
Right.
to make this beautiful thing happen. And the more that we can understand about how that works together, and the more that we can help, again, curtail all of those signaling pathways that might be amped up and not doing you any favors, it's a multivariable problem. So
For sure.
yeah.
Another thing that we talk about often is it's really the lab when you're picking a clinic. The lab is so, so important, and not to override the doctors by any means, but the lab is really where you want to check what their statistics are, how things go, what their process is, in order to see, like, am I signing up with a place that's reputable and has a good track record, so to speak. So from your perspective, doing what you do in and out, and obviously not being too biased to RMA, how would you say that to somebody off the street that was like, what does that even mean? Why would a lab matter so much when I'm going into a process of IVF, or even just um, you know, it's such a big investment, right? People think if I'm going to a fertility doctor, initially they think I'm automatically going to have to do IVF. And I say all the time, that does not mean you're going to have to do IVF. It just means you're seeing a doctor who specializes in fertility. You would not go to a neurologist to have them look at your wrist. Like, we want to make sure the right doctor is looking at the lay of the land to see what's happening. Second to that, if you do happen to go down the road where you need any assisted reproductive technology with that particular doctor and their clinic, why is a lab so important?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I'm going to be biased, right? So I do think that the lab is the crux of a clinic, but that's not to undermine all the other parts of a clinic, right? Because from the
Of
get-go, you
course,
got to connect with your provider,
for
right?
sure.
Because those are the people that are going to be really patient facing, and that's your provider, your physician, your nursing team, because they're going to be holding the patient's hand in this
Right. Quite
process.
literally. You're
Quite
seeing
literally,
them every
every
day,
day.
every other day. You're
Yeah,
talking to them,
yeah,
you're getting your reports
yeah.
every like all the time. So it is really, really critical that you feel in alignment with whoever you decide to go with.
You do. So you need this combination of people that you trust as far as from the clinical side. But the lab, you go home after your egg retrieval, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Actually, it's some of the most delicate work that needs to be done, and it's the one that needs really the most care and attention. Um, you're making you're growing an embryo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to make sure that it's done appropriately, and it's going to be the basis or one of the biggest factors that plays into whether or not you can achieve a pregnancy. Um, you need the highest quality everything because you want to stack everything in your corner to make sure that you are able to have the most successful outcome. Um, there's lots of different types of equipment, and there's lots of different types of um, culture media for embryos. At the end of the day, what you need are people who really know what they're doing, right? So
And
that's
how do you tell that though from
you're going to call and you're going to ask them about statistics, and you're going to be that patient that asks, hey, I
right,
want to know in the last 6 months, give me give me the data to look at, right?
right.
So I'm a scientist, I want to know numbers, I want to see what have you been what are your trends, what do you do, ask about fertilization rate. That's going to show you how good people are basically putting sperm and eggs together. Ask about blast conversion rate. That's going to tell you how good is that lab at growing embryos up to the blastocyst phase. Ask them about their pregnancy rates in your age group. These are all things that, as a patient, you have a right to ask and learn, and your doctor can help guide you to that information. You can also do some internet snooping. SART is a great place to go to look at data. Um, so ask the questions,
Right.
and ask them. What does that embryology team look like back there? Um, it's you're just as no it's just as important part of your care to know about what's going on behind those locked doors. um, Read, inform yourself about, there's lots of information out there, and ask the questions.
I agree. And not only is it a huge financial investment, but emotional investment as well. So before you take that step,
Of
it,
course.
if you get that vibe from any sort of clinic or doctor, I always say move on, find somebody that you feel good about. There's so many amazing doctors now that are out there that are as great as the older ones were. There's a whole new generation that are very open and very on a different emotional level with the patients that they weren't before.
And that's different, and different people are going to connect with different types of providers, right? But
Correct.
a good lab is a good lab, and what you want is you want that to be data driven, and you want to just ask the questions and inform yourself. um, you it doesn't, I understand how much people have to trust us, and it's this huge moment. Think about it. You're in an egg retrieval and you say, okay, well, we'll call you in 5, 6, or 7 days and let you know how things went. Do you know how much trust that takes? That is an amazing amount of emotional. It's a big emotional ask for other
Yeah.
people. So make sure that you connect with the clinician, and make sure that you are getting the answers that make you feel good about that lab that you're going to be putting all that trust into. Ask about rates. Ask about how they do chain of custody. Ask about how they make
What
sure
did
that
you say? Chain of custody?
chain of custody. That is one of
What
the
is that?
chain of custody. There are things in this life that are not an option, and broken chain of custody is one of them. That basically means that if I'm getting this sperm sample from this person, I'm tracking it at every single step of the way. I'm witnessing that this sperm came from this person and this egg came from this dish. This is basically how we can keep you safe and keep your gametes safe. And that's a big one of the biggest things that people go home and go, oh my gosh, I hope they're doing everything right.
Right.
You're like, oh, you read all these stories, I'm like, oh. And so you think, and imagine spiraling at home and kind of making yourself crazy on Google looking, and
Yes.
ask about it ahead of time. How do you guys ID things? Do you have everything double ID'd? Do you use any sort of witnessing software to help aid?
Hmm.
And those are things that are going to make you more informed and feel better about the choices that you're making.
Yeah, for sure. I know I got a bill from my clinic years later of like, you owe us money on embryos. I'm like, I don't have any embryos. I was like, that's not a good
They're like, well,
situation, right?
that's not a good look. Yes.
Yeah. But that's great. I didn't know that that was even something again that you could ask. So thank you for informing that for us to know that that is yet something else, because it is, you do wonder that
Of
you do,
course.
and you do hear those stories of, I thought I implanted a female embryo and I was told that it was a boy. Like, how is that even possible?
Right.
So yeah, I think those sort of situations happen less and less because there are so many safeties in place,
Of course.
and thank goodness for that. But at the same time, I think, as you pointed out, it's really for your peace of mind to know what is the process.
Isn't it going to feel better to know? I mean, I want to know a process, and once I understand it, then I'm like, okay, I can put trust in that.
Yeah,
It's another thing to feel that you are knowledgeable and have kind of a know-how about.
right. How often, or what is the, how how involved is the doctor in the actual dish itself? Like, do they just get the reports from you guys and then call us and say yada yada yada?
Um, kind of, yeah.
I
That's
mean,
yeah,
again, the doctors are amazing. We love them and
right.
adore them.
They're,
We couldn't do this
they're
without them, but I'm
doing
just,
a lot of upfront work with the patient, but the doctor isn't in the lab day to day, right? So it's the embryologist, it's us here in the back tending to all the, and tending 24 hours,
right.
7 days a week, always. There's like
That
no
was going to
break,
be my next
right?
statement.
So this is quite literally, they're a baby right from that, right from the get go, because they need something all the time. And when they need something, you come running, right?
So, for example, what, when you say they need something, what would you see that they need that you have to, somebody
I
has to do
know that
something?
I need to change out their culture media on X day, and that's not optional, right? Everything is timed. I
Right.
know that when I get this egg, 2 hours later, I'm going to have to do this next procedure, and then
Mm,
following that, at this time, this is when I need to do the injections. So everything is timed to have an optimal outcome. So
mhm.
it's not an option to be like, well, I'll get to it when I can.
Right.
That doesn't. This is not an improv show, right? This is not
Right.
IVF Lab. You got to do it and do it right every single time without changing anything. And you got to get it right. And their needs are very specific.
Right.
That means that everything is constantly also being monitored on alarm systems.
Hmm.
Um, my phone is always on my person, right? Because we have
Mhm.
everything wired up to give constant data readouts. And yes, I will. I'm not gonna lie. I look at it all the time to make sure that everything is okay.
Yes.
But that's what you do when you're an embryologist, right?
Mm,
You double check, you
that's so
triple check,
cool.
and then when no one's looking, you check one more time to make sure.
Right.
And that's part of keeping things optimal and safe.
And how is it for you? Because the doctor has a relationship with us, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm actually in the midst of writing my book around my first miscarriage, and my husband was helping through how the partners
yeah,
deal with that portion of
yeah.
it. And I remember thinking exactly those words that the doctor said to us. I'm sorry, guys, like, because we've had this long relationship with him, and he knew what that meant for us. How is it for you guys in the back that don't get that personal relationship with whoever these little ones belong to? Do you feel kind of disconnected from the bigger picture, or do you feel like, oh, Elizabeth and Dave King are out there and I've seen them and I know that and I'm like cheering for their
We
little
are.
guy?
We're
I
cheering
mean, I
them.
know you are, but
Yeah.
does it feel different because you don't have that day-to-day interaction, or is it like better because you don't get as emotionally involved with the people?
Gosh, it's a hard one. We are very emotionally vested. And that answer might actually depend from embryologist to embryologist, to be very
True.
honest with you.
Right.
So to be fair, I think that I can only speak for myself.
Yes.
That chart isn't just a medical chart. You're
Yeah.
very alive to us and to me, and we get to know you because we're constantly talking with the nurses, the doctor, who's coming up, what's going on in this case. So maybe we don't
Hmm.
talk to you every single day, but we're talking about you in a good way, right? Because we're following your case and making
Right.
sure, okay, when is this procedure going to happen? All right, have they been seen before? So we're following you, and just because we don't talk every single day, at least for me, it doesn't mean that I'm any less connected, probably connected in a different way, but
Right.
really almost this most intimate way, right?
Of
Because
course. Yeah.
we, we're doing kind of the behind the scenes
For
work.
sure.
Um, and being an embryologist, you don't get, you know, frequently people don't write you like the letter that they do to the doctor, right? Like, thank you
Yes.
so much. Um, and that's fine, right? That, and you're okay with that because you know that the doctor and the patient have that connection. Um, but it's no less special when you hear somebody in the lobby who's brought in their kiddo. We all pile out. We all
Yeah.
want to see, right? And then we're all elbowing each other at the computer to see, like, who did
Yeah.
the biopsy, who did the transfer, who did the ICSI, you know?
That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
That's cool. I mean, I at any of the clinics that I ever went to, the embryologists were never like I never spoke to them, I never saw them.
yeah,
It was never you were not allowed to contact them, and I think because the impression that I got was because people can get a little bit overly excitable, I guess. I don't know what the right word to use is, but wanting to know the daily update of what it's looking like and how it's going and all of these things. But I think that as part of that intro, right, you meet with the financial person, you meet with the doctor, the nurses, your team. In my opinion, I think that the embryologist or the embryology team should be part of that intro because it is so important to say, these are the ones that are going to be doing the work back behind there. And again, that's just my me on my soapbox, but I guess because I am so appreciative and I understand what goes into it, and you saying that it's 24/7, it really genuinely is. I remember when I did my egg retrieval, it was Thanksgiving, and they're like, it doesn't stop just because it's Thanksgiving Day. Like we gotta keep going. And I was like, oh my God, I remember feeling so guilty of like,
but don't,
you
right?
know,
Because we all sign up knowing that that's part of it, right? And
yeah,
yeah, sure, you work Christmas Day, you work Thanksgiving, you work, but that's And I remember working, lots of Mother's Day, and I've always thought to myself, well, okay, maybe I'm not with my family, but we're helping other people become mothers, and
Right.
that's not a bad way to spend the day.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know?
It
So
is. What
yeah,
I mean, the joy that you get from the gratification that you get from your job must be amazing. I mean, every job has its own nuances. I get that, but at the end of the day, for you to go home and to say, "Oh my God, I saw a baby being made today," and or one got transferred back in today, like I know the smiles that I get, it like hurts my face.
of
I
course.
can't even imagine what it's like for you guys on a daily basis. So exciting.
It's amazing, and it doesn't lose its luster because it's that special moment each time for that patient, and we really connect with that.
Yes,
It's definitely it's a high stress job, long
of
hours,
course.
early hours. It's a lot. So you do this because you love it and
Hmm.
because you're really really connected to the process and to the patients.
Right. I say all the time, for us, it's life changing. For you guys, it's just another day in the office. But I think what I can tell from you is you get that it is life changing for
Yeah,
us
for
on the
sure.
other
It's,
side.
maybe, yes, it's something that you've explained a number of times or a question that you've heard before, but you have to take pause because it's somebody's first time. It's somebody's most special, most vulnerable moment, and you have to do it justice by empathizing in that moment
Hmm.
and taking time to explain things and to make it as smooth of a process. And that means
Right.
any interaction that you have with patient and also doing a really good job in the lab. So that's your job, right?
Right.
That's that's
Right.
the big one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you see all the time too, but people that have done 6, 7 rounds with no success, or maybe they get one embryo, but then that embryo doesn't take. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's real, and that is not an easy path to live on every day. And my prayers for those people that they get to their miracle baby in whatever way that ends up
Right.
looking like. And maybe that's, even that conversation is a whole nother thing, right, of
Of
kind of
course.
saying, I'm going to stop trying this on my own, and maybe I go to a donor conception or whatever else. But
Sure.
um, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation and having the passion behind what you do. You can really see that it really truly does matter to you, and that matters to all of us. And I will start by saying also that when I did the tour of the RMA Los Angeles, well, there's two in LA now, right? I think.
Coming soon, a satellite office, but right
Okay,
now,
I just wanted to be clear on that.
yeah, yeah,
So when I did go to RMA Los Angeles, Dr. Lande gave me the tour, and she honestly couldn't stop singing Isabel's praises and the lab. And, that is why we are having this podcast today, because the doctor spoke so highly of the team that was behind there doing the work. And I just, again, want to say thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for being here, and know that you are appreciated so much in the work that you're doing.
thank you very, very much for inviting me. This has been really lovely to talk and kind of, I hope it's been helpful and just even a little bit to somebody that will be wonderful. And I think more of this is important so that you can understand what happens in an IVF lab
For sure.
from a patient perspective. And I have to say that it's not just me working here. I have a tremendous team, and they are spectacular. They are some of the most amazing embryologists that I've ever seen. So while Dr. Lande was very complimentary of me, I do not do it by myself. So
Yeah.
thank you for today, and I hope to talk again soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes, and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.